Most people know Pythagoras for a single idea. A formula, a triangle, a name trapped inside a classroom, reduced to numbers on a board, memorized, repeated, then forgotten. But that is not who Pythagoras was. Not really, because long before he became a theorem, he was something far more dangerous. A philosopher, a mystic, a keeper of hidden teachings, a man who believed that numbers were not inventions of the human mind, but the structure of reality itself. And if that was true, then mathematics was never just mathematics. It was revelation. It was initiation. It was power. Welcome to mysterious encounters. History often does this to extraordinary people. It trims them down, fouls off the edges, removes the mystery, turns living systems of thought into neat, harmless facts. And no one has been cleaned up more than Pythagoras. You were taught that he discovered a relationship in right triangles, but you were probably not taught that he founded a disciplined brotherhood, that his followers lived by strict rules, that silence was part of their training, that numbers were treated almost like sacred beings, that music, astronomy, morality, and the soul were all connected in one hidden system, and that to the people around him. This was not simply education, it was a way of life, a path of transformation, a mystery school disguised as philosophy. Pythagoras lived in the 6th century before the Common Era, and like many figures standing at the threshold between legend and history, the details of his life blur into myth. Some accounts say he traveled widely, Egypt, Babylon, perhaps farther. Some say he studied with priests, learned from older traditions, and returned carrying fragments of knowledge that were never meant for the unprepared. Whether every story is true is almost beside the point, because what matters is what emerged from him when he returned, not a school in the modern sense, but an order, a disciplined community in southern Italy where those who entered did not merely learn ideas, they were changed by them. Imagine it, a house of study, but also of ritual, a place where speech was controlled, where diet was regulated, where self-mastery mattered as much as intellect, where the outer world of politics and noise was set against an inner world of proportion, harmony, and law. This was not random eccentricity, it was training, because Pythagoras did not believe truth could simply be handed over. He believed the human being had to be prepared for it, that knowledge without transformation was dangerous, that some truths could only be received by a mind brought into order. And that is the first hidden layer of Pythagoras. He was not merely asking what is true. He was asking, what kind of person must you become to bear the truth? At the heart of his teaching was a radical claim. Everything is number. Not everything can be counted. Not everything is a statistic. That is not what he meant. He meant something far deeper, that beneath appearance, beneath matter, beneath chaos, there exists order, pattern, ratio, relationship, a hidden intelligibility woven into the world itself. To Pythagoras, number was not a tool invented by humanity to describe reality after the fact. Number was the reason reality could exist in a coherent form at all. It was architecture, law, the invisible frame beneath the visible world. And once you see this, you begin to understand why his ideas carried such force. Because if reality is structured by proportion, then truth is not arbitrary. It is discoverable. If harmony governs the cosmos, then disorder is not ultimate. It is deviation. If number is the hidden language of existence, then to understand number is to begin reading the mind of creation itself. This is where the story deepens. Because Pythagoras did not isolate mathematics from life, he saw its reflection everywhere. In music, in the heavens, in ethics, in the soul. And this is why he still matters. Not because he solved a problem, but because he offered a unifying vision, one in which reality was not broken into separate subjects, but revealed as one living pattern. Take music. One of the most famous insights associated with the Pythagorean tradition is that musical harmony can be expressed through numerical ratios. A string shortened by half produces an octave. Other simple ratios produce consonant intervals. What sounds beautiful to the ear can be traced to mathematical relationship. Pause there for a moment, because this is not small. This means that beauty itself, at least in one domain, can emerge from number. That harmony is not merely emotional, it is structural. That what moves the soul may do so because it reflects an order deeper than personal taste. For Pythagoras, this was enormous. It meant that number was not cold, not dead, not abstract. It sang, and if music could reveal number, what about the heavens? Here the Pythagorean imagination reached upward. The cosmos, too, was believed to move according to order and proportion. Later thinkers would call this the music of the spheres. Not literal sound heard with the physical ear, but a cosmic harmony. A universe not drifting in randomness, but arranged according to law, ratio, and motion. A cosmos that could be understood not as a machine without meaning, but as a living order, a harmony vast enough to include stars, seasons, cycles, and souls. This is where Pythagoras stops looking like a teacher of geometry and starts looking like an initiate of the universe. Then there is the symbol of the tetrachtes, a triangular figure made from the first four numbers arranged in descending rows. 1, 2, 3, 4. Together they sum to 10. To the Pythagoreans, this was not just arithmetic. It was sacred form, a symbolic map of emanation, order, and completion. Unity becoming multiplicity, source unfolding into structure, the point becoming line, the line becoming plane, the plane suggesting form. A hidden cosmology inside a simple triangle. The kind of symbol that looks harmless until you realize it contains an entire worldview. This was something followers reportedly revered deeply, because in it, number, geometry, and metaphysics were no longer separate. They were one. And perhaps that is the true challenge of Pythagoras for the modern mind. He refuses fragmentation. He does not allow you to divide the world neatly into compartments. Math over here, music over there, soul somewhere else, cosmos in another category. He keeps bringing everything back together, as if to say, no, it is one pattern. One law expressed at many levels, and your mistake is not ignorance of one part. It is failure to see the whole. Of course, not everything in the Pythagorean world was serene. Like many intense communities built around powerful ideas, there were tensions, divisions, and eventual conflict. Political entanglements and hostility grew around the movement. Later stories speak of persecution, destruction, and the scattering of the brotherhood. Whether every detail is exact or dramatized by time, the pattern is familiar. Communities guarding transformative knowledge often do not end peacefully, because once an idea begins changing how people perceive reality, it also changes how they relate to power. And power rarely ignores that for long. But maybe the most haunting part of Pythagoras is this. His teachings survive in fragments, echoes, reported by others, preserved imperfectly. A theorem here, a doctrine there, a rumor of initiation, a memory of sacred ratios, a triangle left behind by a much larger vision. What remains is enough to feel the outline of something great, but incomplete enough to provoke obsession. And perhaps that's why he still exerts such pull, because he stands at the edge of what can be known historically and what must be intuited philosophically. Half teacher, half apparition. You learn to calculate, but were you ever taught to contemplate? You learned equations, but were you ever taught why proportion feels beautiful? You learned data, but were you ever taught to ask what kind of world becomes visible when existence itself is seen as pattern? That is the road Pythagoras opens, and once you step onto it, ordinary education begins to feel strangely incomplete. Maybe that was always the dividing line. Not between intelligence and ignorance, but between surface knowledge an initiatory knowledge. One teaches you how to function inside the visible world. The other teaches you how to perceive the invisible structure beneath it. And Pythagoras, more than most, seems to belong to that second current, not the current of information, the current of transformation. Because in the end, his most unsettling idea was never mathematical, it was spiritual, that the soul itself could be brought into harmony, that a human life could become ordered like music, that chaos was not your essence, only your condition, and that beneath the noise of ordinary existence, there is a pattern waiting to be remembered, not invented. Remembered. Maybe that is why his name survived. Not because he solved one problem, but because he touched something permanent. A suspicion that reality is intelligible. A suspicion that beauty is lawful. A suspicion that consciousness is not separate from cosmic order. A suspicion that numbers are not dead symbols on a page, but living traces of the architecture beneath the world. And if that is true, then every measurement hides a philosophy, every pattern hides a law, every harmony hides a map, and every triangle you were taught to solve may have been the smallest visible fragment of a much older code.